We are getting ready to begin another edition of Sunday School Chat here at Hall Memorial CME Church. We're looking at a story about Esther. A lot of people don't talk about Esther a lot. It's one of the only books in the Bible that doesn't mention God.
Exactly right.
But if you read Esther closely, you will find God moving all through that lesson.
That's exactly right.
You know, something on the inside tells you that this ain't just about Esther and Mordecai. This is about what God does for his people.
Right.
And you don't have to mention God's name to know that he is involved with the work of his people. So that bears good news for us today, because a lot of times when we don't mention God's name, when we don't give thanks enough, God is still working in our behalf.
And you know, we hit the saying, God looks at the heart of man, not so much of what comes out of our mouth. God looks at the heart. So like you said, even in this lesson, God is really not, by name, is not mentioned. But if you read the lesson, you can see God all through the lesson.
All throughout the lesson. And everybody that reads it closely seems to pick up on that, you know. In our In Focus story, the story that tried to set us up for the biblical story, talks about James and Mariah. And it spoke about Mariah's love for justice. And she also was reading Esther. And it says that Mariah and James shared how Esther was a reluctant hero, but eventually changed her mind to stand up for her people. Now, she was in a very, very unique situation. This was well after the Jewish exile in Babylon. You know, we're still in Babylon, but this is well after the exile. She and her family are one of a few, well, I ain't gonna say a few, but it might have been many, many Jews that stayed behind.
Right.
They found out that this, Darius was the one that released them.
Right.
Or that Cyrus, or one of the two, but we understand that some stayed, and they were living in Babylon, and they were enjoying life in Babylon. But every now and then, Satan would raise his head and remind you of who you are.
That's right.
Where you came from, and who he is. You know, and we find out that Haman, another character in our story, he was an Amalekite.
Right.
Yeah, and they were enemies of God's people, the Jewish people back in the homeland. They were, as a matter of fact, the Amalekites were so bad, God said to blot their name out of history. Just blot their name out. And so Esther was in a very, very unique situation. Here she was, a foreigner, and she was being, she had been considered as queen and won over many, many other beautiful young women to become the next queen of King Xerxes. And so you can see now that don't normally happen. The king, I don't think at that time that he even knew that she was Jewish.
He didn't. And you know, when you read that story, the first wife, king couldn't get along with her.
Vashti.
Right.
Yeah, that was her name.
So he didn't have a kill. He didn't have anything done to her. But she no longer was queen. But now, when you read in that story, she still had power. Because when Esther came on the scene, you know, yeah.
So, but we know that a king had unlimited power and authority back in those days. He could do virtually anything he wanted to do, you know. And when you live up under an administration like that, you have to walk carefully everywhere you go.
And you know what's strange about that to me though? Even the wife, the queen, had to watch what she say to her husband, the king. You know, you would think the wife ought to be close to him. She ought to be to just kind of talk to him like she wants to behind closed doors. But even the queen, she had to measure her words of what she wanted to say to the king.
Absolutely, and that's the way it was back during those times. And then probably, I would go so far as to say in some cultures today, you know, it is much like that, you know, where the king or the president or whoever is supreme ruler. And, you know, wives come and go.
Right.
They could have several at one time, you know. And so everybody is subservient to the king.
Right.
So in our story, this man, Haman, he was like second up under the king.
Yes, he was.
He had a lot of power.
A lot of power. And he was a wealthy man.
And he just got besides himself one day, and because he thought people should kneel and bow to him like they did the king. Now you're the king's second in command, but you're not the king.
Right.
But he wanted people to bow and honor him just like they bowed and honored the king. And our friend Mordecai, see, Mordecai found out who he really was.
Mordecai was a Jew, and like you said, Haman, really, he hated all Jews, and especially Mordecai.
Him and Mordecai did not get along.
You know, and the lesson tells us what he really hated. Mordecai wouldn't bow to him.
Right. So for those of you at home, just open your Bibles to Esther chapter 7, the book of Esther in the Old Testament, and it's the first 10 verses, verses 1 through 10, is what we're studying this morning. It's a very short lesson. It's not long at all, and we're just going to pull out a few main themes out of the lesson and be able to understand how God works in our lives while not even being announced.
Yes.
Not even seem like even being noticed, you know. But we know that the Jewish people, they know how to pray. And they know who to pray to, you know. Like I said, this is post-exilic for the Jewish, but these are just some Jews that decided to stay. And so now they're having a bit of a hard time in the kingdom that they decided to make their home in, you know. So, and we find out that Mordecai and Esther are related.
Right.
They're like cousin-in-laws or something. The Bible tries to tell us, you know, that Mordecai is more like maybe an uncle figure to her than anything else. But I keep reminding myself, you know, that she is a foreigner, and she went up against all those beautiful women of the kingdom and won over King Xerxes. So she had to be a beautiful woman.
She did.
She had to be beautiful, you know.
And you know, and when you read into the lesson, Esther, she was saying that if they was put in slavery, they probably could accept that. But now, Haman's plan was to just kill them all, get rid of them. And that's what she was afraid of. And that's what she wanted to take to the king, but she had to pick her time to do it.
Okay, so let's see if we can kind of set this up. We have a beautiful female who is Jewish, and she has Jewish relatives and friends, living in the country with her. And she gets to be considered as one of the next candidates to become queen, become the king's wife. And this very, very special friend of hers, her Mordecai, her relative, him and Naaman are butting heads.
Right.
And because because Mordecai refuses to bow to Haman, Haman says, well, I'm going to get rid of you and all your Jewish folks.
That's right.
So, it wasn't enough just to get rid of Haman. But now when you're talking about getting rid of all the Jewish people, now you're talking about getting rid of even Esther. Because she's Jewish.
And we remember, Haman was so angry and upset till some of his folks came to him, even his wife, and said, now you got to do something about Mordecai. Haman thought about it. So he had a gallows built that he was going to, by the king, have him hung.
And that is another point that when you kind of overstepping your bounds, yes, you do have a lot of power and influence, but somewhere a little light in your head needs to go off and let you know that I do not have the power of life and death like the king does.
Right.
And he thought he did.
And let's show you how God steps in. The Bible tells us, the king laid down that night. He couldn't hardly sleep. So he called his folks in to kind of do some things to make him comfortable.
Soothe his nerves.
Soothe his nerves. And what they did, they went and brought out some sort of history books of things he did in the past. And in reading one of the books, they saw where Mordecai
Did some good things.
saved the king. Two of his men had planned to assassinate him, the king.
Right.
And then Mordecai told about it. And they was executed.
Right. Right.
And the king said, well, what did they do for Mordecai for doing such a good deed?
Right.
And his folks said, well, they didn't do anything, nothing, king. He said, what?
Yeah. Yeah. It seems that he was a real fair man when it came to stuff like that. And that it probably played into him and Haman not getting along.
Right.
Because here's a man that the king didn't know anything about, especially the deeds that he had done for the king.
For him.
But now that we know that Mordecai is a good guy, he saved the king's life and everything, he could become a rival of Haman's. Haman is enjoying being second in command, and he don't want no competition. And Mordecai, could become one of those people that would rival Haman for the king's attention and for his ability to be high up in the administration there in Babylon at the time. So Mordecai is an important man also, but to Haman, he's hated.
Yep.
He's hated. And because you're not the king, because King Mordecai, Haman is thinking, you're the only person I can't kill.
And
the king is the only person he can't kill.
You know that old saying, when you dig one ditch, you better dig two?
Yeah.
Now Haman had that gallows built, and the plan was to execute Mordecai.
Right.
Go back to the story. The next morning, after the king had heard about Mordecai saving his life, he called Haman in. But the way the story went, he asked Haman, now, this man, no, this person that did all these good things for me, we need to do something for him. So, the way the story goes, Haman thinking the king talking about him. He said, now, you tell us what we need to do for this man. And Haman said, you know, king, so I think we ought to get one of your finest robes and put on him. We ought to bring out one of your finest horses and put the crown on the horse's head and let him ride the horse. And then we put him on the horse, we ought to just march him through the town so the crowd can just praise him. And the king said, you know, that's a good idea. He said, now, but what I want you to do, you go find Haman, Mordecai, and put all that on him.
What? You ain't talking about me?
Now, Haman is scared to death now.
Well, like I said, he had become a rival in his eye, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want the king thinking more of Mordecai than me.
That's right.
You know. So, in his mind, he had good reason to try to get rid of Mordecai. But at the same time, though, because of that long and still hatred against the Israelites stemming from his homeland over there near Israel, because see, he knows the history of the Israelites also, and he knows the history of his own people, and they know that they were death enemies, you know, against them, and he don't like Mordecai for that purpose and that purpose only. He prejudiced, he racist.
Yes.
You know, and so that's just all it is right there for him, you know. So I can get rid of you for more than one reason is what Haman is thinking. You know, I can get rid of Mordecai, you know, because you rivaling me here with the king, and you my arch enemy from way back anyway. And so, and Mordecai and Esther have a conversation.
Right.
They do. And God has positioned her. You understand what I'm saying? God has positioned her.
You know, like we said, God's name is not mentioned, but you can see God in the work.
You can see his work.
You can see
his work. He has positioned Esther to be in a place where she can be effective in making a change. And I'm talking about this is a history making change here, you know. Our author of our lesson says, you know, that actually, you know, what Esther did changed the history.
And you know the thing it is too? Even though she's queen, but she's trying to save her people. And in the process of trying to save her people, her life is in danger.
Right.
She had to pick her words and do it exactly right in order for God's plan to work.
So we find out that there were 2 banquets. And the first banquet was sort of like to introduce her, you know, to everyone. Now, the second banquet was to make it official, you know, that she would become queen and she would take Vashti's place. Vashti was no longer would be the queen, and she is the honoree that night. And the king was so thrilled and honored and just happy to have her become his wife that he said, sweetheart, you can have anything you want.
Anything.
Up to half of my kingdom.
My Lord. Tell me that ain't love.
Well, that's what he told her. Just make a request. Any request you can have up to half of my kingdom. And then immediately, she didn't even hesitate. When he said that, she went right on into telling him, said, well, somebody is trying to kill me. And it's him.
It's him.
She pointed him out immediately. And it's him. he has vowed to kill me and all of my people.
All of my people.
And, you know, this says the king just got outrageously mad and had to go out in the garden and walk around and let some of the steam off. You know, my God, you know, this woman here, I can't believe what she is saying. My second in command has given orders. You said gallows, but it ended up being a sharpened pole.
Right.
That they was just gonna hang him on like a skewer, you know, not really hang him with a noose, but to impale him on a pole. That's what he was gonna do for Mordecai. And so King comes back into the banquet, and there is Haman. He all down on her knees, at his knees,
Begging the queen.
begging for his life.
Yes.
Okay, the king sees that and thinks that he's trying to assault the queen. He's trying to assault my wife. He says he gets mad all over again. And after he finishes talking, his servants come over there and they cover Haman's face.
Right.
And that was a sign that you are no more. Your life is fixing to end. When the king has said what he said, he doesn't want to lay eyes on you anymore, so we have to cover your face.
For all that power you thought you had,
Yeah.
all of that influence you thought you had, all of that's gone.
All of that is gone, you know. And so, after it's all said and done, and instead of Mordecai being impaled, Haman was impaled by his own invention.
Dig one ditch.
Yeah.
Better dig two.
Well, he dug one and ended up dying in that one. It was for Mordecai.
Yes.
But he ended up there, and that lets you know the Bible is true. When you live by the sword,
You die by it.
you die by the sword.
Exactly.
Yes, you know. And so you have to be very, very careful in your handling of situations, you know, especially with fellow Christians. Because when we say God's people, we understand that when you use that expression nowadays, that is simply those people that have confessed their sins and asked Jesus to step into their lives. We understand that when you do that, you become one of God's people.
Right.
Now, so all we have to do is just imagine that we're in the shoes of those Israelites that he took care of so well, and the church today is God's people, and he takes care of his church.
And you know, we remember that scripture that says, let us do good unto all men, and especially unto those that are of the household of faith.
Yeah.
It's dangerous to mess with God peoples now.
That,
Very dangerous.
And I think people tend to forget that before they do anything to you. They don't look at your resume.
Right.
You know, because if you were to look at, you know, my resume, the only thing that you would see is that I declared the Methodist denomination as my choice of religion. That's all you will see. You know,
exactly right.
That doesn't tell you, you know, my relationship with Christ. But if it's there on the resume, you know, maybe you should pay attention, you know, as to just how religious or how spiritual a person might be when you get ready to render judgment on them of any sort, you know. In other words, God is looking for fair and equal justice for his people. This is, it says injustice will be punished. That is the title of our lesson. And the opposite of injustice is justice.
It's justice.
That's right. You know, and so God expects justice. As long as you administrate just justice to the closest of your ability, because you're not going to be perfect because you're man.
Right.
Only God can administer perfect justice, you know. But we are capable of rendering injustice.
Right.
We're very capable of that, you know. And it says, injustice will be punished.
Yes.
That's the title of our lesson, you know. And Mordecai, he was unjustly dealt with by Haman. And as a consequence, not only would Mordecai suffer, but all of the Jewish people would suffer.
Right.
You're talking about God's people now. God didn't allow it to happen. Without mentioning God the first time throughout that whole book of Esther, God orchestrated the entire event.
And you wonder sometimes, I bet you hate a whole nation of people. You know, you run into people where you hate a few people. But how you hate a whole nation?
Well, I think about some of the wars that history records. Did all Americans hate all Germans?
No.
Did all Americans hate all Japanese? Did all Americans hate all Spaniards once upon a time? I mean, some of these instances of racial injustice stem from way, way back. And it doesn't go anywhere. From one generation to the next, you still find it. You know, It seems like each generation teaches the one behind them, well, these are the folks you gotta hate.
You know, and I'm a Vietnam veteran. I went there. I didn't have no hate in my heart for them. I went because my country sent me there. But as far as hating people, didn't hate none of them.
You didn't have anything against them personally, did you?
Not at all.
But they were sworn enemies of the United States, and you had sworn to the United States that you would fight against her enemies. And so any enemy that the United States, anyone that the United States declared an enemy, you had sworn to fight them, you know, as a military person, you know. And God understands that situation. He understands that wholly, you know. The only thing that he's going to support you is when you do something that the Army told you to do, and it's not going against what he would do.
Right.
God supports you in you following the orders of your country, or whoever that may be, the government, the city, the county, the state, just like we're up on the orders, you know, about in the coronavirus.
Right.
Okay, you know. But now, if we knew that we was doing something that went against the word of God, he gonna support you if you stand for him.
Right.
And so we as Christians, church people, we know that, you know. As long as we standing for God, God is gonna support all that we do and say. So it says that for our lesson came out of out of chapter 7, first 10 verses, and all of chapter 7 is just those 10 verses. After that, chapter 8 starts, and it says, on that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the queen, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And so she goes on to say, well, he's my relative. Mordecai, you know, and I are related. And it says, and the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman,
Mm-hmm.
and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman.
Ain't the Lord good? God can fix it, can he? The Lord can fix it.
Oh man, it is so beautiful the way that this thing unfolds. And you just see the work of God. Only God could do the things that he did, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He done set Esther up before Esther even poses the question. Or before she even tells him what, you know, she wants. God has already set her up, you know, to win. And I know that when I came across that in the lesson, I put, it says, the king had already proclaimed that he was both willing to hear and approve her request, which is evidence that God had honored the prayers and fasting to provide her with favor from the king even before she made her request known.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, when you get ready to go into the king and ask him for something, you need to be prayed up.
Mm-hmm.
He has just that much power, you know. And so she prayed and fasted before these words even came out of her mouth. Mordecai advised her to do that.
Right.
You pray. You pray before you go in and do this. I mean, because she really didn't want to do it at first.
Mm-hmm.
She thought that was overstepping her bounds. But Mordecai knew that that would be the only thing to save him and the rest of the Jews.
Amen. Amen.
Esther, you got to do this. All your people here are in your hands. And so before she made that request unto the king, she prayed and fasted. And God answered.
God answered her prayers.
We did he answer.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
So God works like that in our life today. Another bracket, it says that it is our job as a community, as a church community, to continue uplifting voices who speak out against unjust practices. So for all those people out there that are in the streets, that are, you know, marching and out there campaigning against justice, it says that the church needs to be behind them, you know.
Mm-hmm.
They're championing a great cause, you know, to make sure that everybody gets treated the same. It says, speak out against unjust practices, to keep them in our prayers, and when called upon, to also use our privilege and voice to uplift the silenced voices in our world. And there are some people that can't speak for themselves.
Mm-hmm. You know, and the Bible speaks of those two kind of sins. The sin of omission and the sin of commission. Now we know that the sin of commission is when we willfully sin.
Mm-hmm.
That's commission.
Yeah.
But that sin of omission is when you see wrongdoing and you fail to stand up and speak out against it. That's the sin of omission. And God will hold you responsible for that.
Our lesson says God's rule declares that those who choose to persecute God's chosen ones will ultimately become beholden to them.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to reverse the situation. The first shall be last and the last shall be first, you know. And when it comes to my people, you know, one day they're going to be on top and they're going to stay on top.
You know, sometimes we got a habit of saying when we see wrongdoing, instead of taking a stand like Esther did, we'll say something like, well, ain't none of my business. I ain't gonna get involved in that. But now if you're a child of God, you gotta take a stand.
Yeah. And you know, King Xerxes took a stand himself.
Mm-hmm.
It says, in the revelry of the second banquet, the king asked Esther to make her request known. and obligates himself to fulfill her desire.
Mm.
And so, now, I know they was drinking and having a good time. Maybe he had a little wine or something, but he said what he said.
He did.
And you know, kings that can't back up what they say, a lot of them feel like they don't deserve to be king.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever I say, I need to be able to back it up, you know. And so he wasn't about to let her. It says Esther's wording simultaneously flatters the king and expresses the direness of her situation. She appeals to his ego, his relationship with her as queen, and his sense of reason all at the same time. Saying that she was a very clever woman.
Mm-hmm.
She knew exactly what to say and how to say it.
And when to say it. If you notice, even at that banquet, the first day or so, she didn't bring up what she wanted to tell the king. But when the time was right,
Mm-hmm.
when God got involved.
Yeah. It says that Haman had been plotting genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about getting rid of a whole race of people,
Mm-hmm.
that's genocide.
That's genocide.
Yeah. Genocide against the Jews as an incredible act of evil and injustice because of Mordecai's refusal to bow before him.
Yes.
One man gonna
One
make
man.
you do all of that, you know. Justice was fully exacted in kind for the injustice that Haman intended upon the innocent man and his people. This reminds us that those who prepare traps for others may fall in themselves.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it in a nutshell. And basically, like I said, we had a short lesson this morning, and we're so glad that God works in the background at all the time.
Yes, he does.
If you are a child of God, God never stops working for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have declared your allegiance to God, and he is bound by his own word to take care of you and to do for you as long as you are obedient to him. And so, as an obedient child of God, there's nothing that we really have to fear. The human side makes us doubt. The human side makes us scared. It lets fear creep in. That's the human side of us. But on the spiritual side of us, we have the most powerful friend in the world.
Yes, Lord.
The most powerful friend in the world. And because we're his friend, he works for us on our behalf all the time.
Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for your word this morning. We thank you, Lord, for watching over us. But Lord, we say time and time again, your word is too good to keep to ourselves. We had such a good lesson this morning. Lord, help us to use it in our daily lives. But not only in our lives, Lord. Lord, to use it and spread it. Other people can use this lesson about how we're supposed to love and care for each other. Not holding hate, anger in our hearts. Lord, you told us in your word, don't let the sun go down. Have an ought with your brother. So Lord, help us. We need you, Lord, and we can't do without you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. We hope y'all enjoyed the lesson this morning, and we hope to see you back next week. We would really love for you to respond to the program, and if you have any comments or questions, submit them, and we will be glad to speak to them, talk about them at our next opportunity. So, bless you, and may God keep you is our prayer. Thank you. Jack, you know how to cut it off?